Ugh, great. Now I'm gonna be late to that scrum meeting we had planned. Jason? Is that you? Tim? Wow, hey man! Oh my god, how the hell are you? I'm doing great, how about you? How long has it been? What, like 10 years? Something like that. Man, this is nuts. How you been? Oh, you know, I recently moved up to the head of the trend analysis department at Chilton. Oh wow, that's great. Yeah, another 5 years and I should make sergeant. How about you? Oh, I'm actually here on vacation. Oh, is that right? Yeah, I relocated to Venus shortly after school. The scenery's pretty great, but it's good to get away for a while, you know what I mean? Yeah, I hear that. So, hey, I hope you don't think I'm prying with this, but are you and Karen still together? Oh yeah, we got married a while back. Hey, that's great to hear, man. I'm glad the two of you are doing well. Oh, well, thanks. Any kids? No way. We were trying that for a little while, but with the market the way it is, yeah, it's not great. We do have some Roombas, though. Oh, really? Yeah, Karen's cousin's actually a Roomba breeder. Breeder? Huh, I didn't think that Roombas, bred. Oh, well, I guess, you know, if you want to get technical, she's really more of a manufacturer than a breeder. Still, that's really cool. Yeah, it's the love that really counts. Yeah. Well, hey man, if you ever want to go grab a drink or something after work sometime, you know, chill out like the good old days, that'd be awesome. Thanks, man. Yeah, I think I might have to take you up on that. It'd be great to finally... Hello everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Joey Zero's weekly Warframe show. I'm Joey Zero, and today we're going to be talking primarily about the Corpus. So without further ado, let's take a second to talk about what's going on this week in Warframe. So we didn't really have any substantial changes in the game this week, aside from a hotfix that increased the drop rate of Kavat genetic codes and now allows them to be affected by boosters. We do know that they're working on adding new Kavat breeds, so it's probably not a bad idea to stockpile some codes and spend your Argon on incubator power cores until then. And of course, we've also got Warframe's 6th anniversary weekend wars that are going on right now. This is a new anniversary event that DE's doing, where basically each weekend, starting, you know, last weekend, there will be one particular unit that we're sent out to kill, and if we kill enough of them, we get 10 vaulted relics, and we unlock a bonus event weekend in March. Last weekend, we had to kill Lancers to unlock a double affinity weekend, which, you know, we did. And this upcoming weekend is, fittingly, a war on Corpus crewmen to unlock double credit weekend. And finally, after that, we're going to be killing Chargers to unlock a double resource weekend. So just make sure to keep an eye out, run those alerts if you need the relics for Saren Prime, the Nikana Prime, or the Spira Prime, and keep an eye out for those event weekends in March. A link to the post containing more info about the relics, the dates, and the rewards are going to be in the description below. I know I'm going to be taking some time to grind out a second Saren Prime, so, Yee! And lastly, also pretty fitting for the Corpus theme, we've been getting a lot of info about the upcoming changes on Twitter. Steve has been tweeting a lot about Melee 2.999999999999997. But also, we've been getting lots of interesting looks at the new Corpus Gas City tile set. Honestly, I'm really stoked for this. The current Gas City tile set hasn't really gone stale for me yet, but, you know, I'm still really excited to see what we can look forward to there. Anyway, that's it for this week in Warframe. Just as a reminder, don't forget that Xenogelion, MDR Laws, and I will be doing a 24-hour stream where we spend the entire 24 hours out on Orbivalis to raise money for Children's Miracle Network, where there's going to be special guests, there's going to be giveaways, and just, it would be really cool if we could see all you guys there on March 16th. Just throwing that out there, that'd be pretty neat. Anyway, that's it for now. Let's move on with the show.
Now it's time for an unpopular opinion.
With the Corpus being some of the easiest enemies to farm, DE should implement a death grenade feature that has a chance of killing the player once they kill a Corpus enemy. If, however, the player does survive a death grenade, an EMP should wipe out all their abilities for the next 2 minutes.
You just watched Xenogelion giving an unpopular opinion. Brought to you by Xeneric brand energy soda. Get energized.
Corpus fun fact. Before Damage 2.0, Corpus weapons were generally most effective against themselves. And then they called the Grineer the last advanced faction. Guys, you know what time it is. So, the Corpus today. The Corpus you may know as one of the main factions of Warframe, the more robotic merchant types. Mostly known for their credit greed and their MOAs. Maybe you know of Valid Fee, Nevanyo, or the Feared Sergeant. Anyway, today I want to put the story aside, I mean you can figure that out on your own. Let's talk about the beautiful design of some of these Corpus weapons. I mean, look at the Exurgus, the Plinks, the Oma. Wait, what's that? Of course, how dare I not talk about one of my favorite Corpus weapons out there, the Emprex. The Emprex is by far one of the best beam weapons out there, a true traditional Corpus weapon in the sense that it's super effective against the Corpus. To understand why that is, let's focus on what damage types we're going to be looking for if we want to find the Corpus in Fortuna, Jupiter, or in bargaining them on that Cetus deal. The Corpus have a wide variety of armed forces, so there are 4 different enemy types that you'll be facing. The first 2 types, super simple. Flesh and robotic. Of course, both of them are very different from each other and they'll be vulnerable to very different things. The other 2 types might be a little bit harder though. They're shield, which is just the regular shielding that all Corpus have, and proto shield, which only the more advanced troops have. Now there's an entire chart with how good each form of damage is to each type, which I will link down the video. However, the best combination is Pyro for flash, magnetic for both shield types, and electricity for robotic. So, let's apply that to our loadout. As you can see, here we have the Emprex, and it's got innate electricity damage. Now I've added Firewall to make it just that extra super awesome, especially once we get the shields down. The crowd control on this weapon is just absolutely amazing. This is a personal favorite of mine. If you want to get a weapon though that does all the damage types to like absolutely destroy the Corpus, look for something that has innate magnetic damage, like this Cyanoid Gamma Core. I've only just started playing with this thing, and so far I'm quite liking it, especially to take along with my Emprex, but there are also a bunch of magnetic primaries out there for you to try. You can also spread the different damage types over like different weapons, so let's say I put magnetic and electricity on my primary and then firewall on my secondary. But I'll leave that up to you to like try and experiment with. With that being covered, let me just say, hats off to you for watching the entire 2 minutes today, and I will see you all next week.
Come to sunny Solaris. Hello, colonists of the Corpus Federation. I am your experimental spokesperson simulant, here to represent an anonymous beneficiary. Today, I will talk to you about a very lucrative and exciting business venture. I'm currently in Solaris, where our institution provides amazing opportunities to work right here in our coolant processing facility. Let me explain.
What do you think they did with it after they made that propaganda piece?
Considering the colonists rebelled, I wouldn't be surprised if you throw it out in the trash, but I don't know, Nefanyo seems to be the sort that could just turn anything into a profit.
Welcome to our tip of the week. My name is XandyPants, you can call me Xandy, and today, behold, we're focusing on the Corpus. I'm going to talk about killing the Corpus, or I guess more broadly, enemies with shields and normal flesh, which is basically what Corpus are. Doing something a bit different today, I mostly just wanted to show you a few example builds, so you'll be watching those in action against Orcan enemies in the background. I want to talk a little bit about when I think it makes sense to make builds specifically to kill Corpus. The short version is that I think you shouldn't, but it's a little more complicated than that. 3 very common builds that you notice people using are corrosive, viral, and gas hybrid builds. Here's an example weapon I'm using with Mesa. They all have a nice spread of strong core mods, alongside critical stats and a chosen combined elemental damage type, and they're all built with armor in mind. Corrosive removes the armor, viral or cold synergize with armor ignoring slash procs, and gas gives you yet another force multiplier to overwhelm the armor's damage reduction. Grineer are pretty tanky, so the thought process goes that if you build against armor, you kind of level the playing field and your weapon will do well against everything you fight. But one of the reasons that these hybrid builds built against armor are so frequently used against all types of enemies is that they're also pretty good against pretty much everything else, even when they don't usually have to be. Viral is a potent overall damage type with a very strong effect, while its sometimes substitute Cold has a well-rounded damage bonuses too. and gas procs turn into toxin procs, which bypass shields completely and obliterate infested with cluster synergy as long as you kill the ancients first. Even corrosive, often casually said to be pretty weak against Corpus shields, is actually not, and is almost always doing at least neutral damage. It's only weak to rare proto shields, almost exclusively held by techs and nullifiers. And nullifiers are so squishy once you get through their bubbles that it hardly matters. Corrosive isn't really weak against anything. As you've been seeing in my footage, I'm running corrosive on my kit gun on my peacemakers, and I still have the most trouble with armored enemies. Anything without armor dies almost instantly. These hybrid builds designed to counter armor are also just about the strongest builds against everything else in general, or at least they're more than strong enough against everything else, and you usually still want more damage against the armored enemies. I'm totally talking about when to build specifically against Corpus. What I'm getting at is that it's usually in a more specific situation that you might want to make a build specifically to counter Corpus, or again, units with shields and flesh. If you try to find a general mechanic that is weak to Corpus in particular, you'll find that it's only nullifiers that really get in the way like that, and you can just structure your loadouts to include high fire rate weapons, or the Miter with its augment, or something else to deal with that. Even your Sentinel can help with a weapon like the Death Machine Rifle, and even moderate fire rate weapons like the kit gun you've been seeing make quick work of nullifier bubbles. So I think it's less about when Corpus are particularly resistant to a specific tactic, and more about when you have a tactic that is particularly stronger against another faction. For example, Joey has a Shaku Riven that has a huge faction damage bonus against Grineer and Infested. Because gas triple dips with faction multipliers, his gas build pretty much evaporates Infested and Grineer with weakened armor. And the Toxin procs do bypass shields, so it's also good against Corpus. But Toxin procs are weaker against robotics, and in general I find that there's less clustered groups of Corpus than other factions, which means less gas cluster synergy. This is a situation where the weapon isn't bad at killing Corpus, but it, and the armor countermeasure you usually run with it, are particularly ridiculously good at killing everything else. On top of all that, this is a melee weapon, and Corpus can be less fun to face tank due to the nullifier bubbles and the Osprey fields, so that might be a situation where bringing a silver bullet for the Corpus makes sense. At the moment, I'm experimenting with Mage's Overload, which is pretty specialized, but you can also bring a way to suck enemies together for better gas synergy there. Again, in my mind, it's mostly countering those nullifiers and less about there being some need, or even there being some specific way to counter Corpus as a whole faction. I've been Xandy, and you've been Dandy, and I hope you're now very deadly to enemies of all factions, with that silver bullet for the Corpus when you need it. Thanks for tuning in to our Tip of the Week. Now, on with the show.
Alright lads, today we're discussing what is honestly one of my least favorite weapons in the game, the Angstrum. There's a regular version and there's a Prisma version. We're gonna be focusing primarily on the Prisma version because it's just flat out better. Also because I invested 8 Forma into this thing for some Riven memes a while ago and needed to feel like there was a reason for that. Please Forma responsibly. The Angstrum is a secondary rocket launcher that can fire 1 rocket at a time or can be charged to empty the entire mag in 1 shot. I say it's one of my least favorites because the self-harm in this weapon is just entirely too real. The ammo economy is actually terrible, and it has a tendency to struggle against armored targets. Up to around level 50, it's usable, but beyond that, if you're willing to work around the poor ammo economy and self-damage, you're gonna need some serious armor strip to make this thing work. Also worth noting is that this is one of my favorite weapons to use with Chroma. The one place where this weapon does shine is against unarmored targets, particularly the Corpus. That blast damage is really solid against robotic health, and I tend to run this thing with a gas build, which those toxin procs are good for bypassing shield. Personally, if I'm using this as a room clearer against the Corpus, I like to run this with a faction damage mod because of how those faction mods triple dip with gas procs. I made a video discussing that quite a long time ago. There should be a link up at the top if you want to check that out. Anyway, against the Infested, it's okay. Those Ancients are really gonna mess with you, and with as quick as a lot of the Infested move, expect that you're gonna shoot yourself in the foot with this thing. But against unarmored targets in general, this thing lightning, can shine. But that kind of brings us to the crux of the issue here. The general way that most people build is to take down those much harder to kill armored targets, which are by far the most difficult opponents. If you build for those, it tends to normalize the difficulty of the different factions. Also, running faction mods on really any weapon is a bit of a problem, because, if you know how to make use of the faction modifiers and are willing to swap builds or run specific weapons for different factions, they can be a sizable performance increase for a weapon. But for most players, in most situations, that's not the case. There is value there, but it's pretty niche value at best, and a waste of mod space at worst. Everybody plays this game differently with different goals and preferences and play styles, and for some players, a weapon like this might have a solid spot in their arsenal. That's not me, but if you can eke out some decent value there for yourself, hey, more power to you. Anyway, the Angstrum. 1 out of 5 for the regular Angstrum, and 2 out of 5 for the Prisma Angstrum. Overall, I'd say it's not worth the Forma, coming from someone that has put a lot of Forma into this thing. But, as usual, I invite you to form your own opinions about it. Alright everybody, thanks so much for watching. Just a reminder, keep an eye out for those event alerts for the relics, and also keep an eye out for those reward weekends next month. Definitely not going to want to miss those. Feel free to check out the playlist of all the other episodes of the show so far, and of course, make sure you check out all the other creators that were involved in the creation of this episode. All the links to their channels and social media will be listed in the description below. If you're new to the channel, I'd like to invite you to consider subscribing. If you're interested in supporting the creation of more content like this, check the description for a link to the support page. But that's it. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Once again, my name's Joey Zero. Okay, bye!